Hi guys, so I'm back. I am so excited for you guys to learn a lot about our next discussion about sobriety and culture on board with Laura Kilbey and Gary Napier, monitored by Holly Overton. They will be on the studio in a second. Here we'll examine the culture of alcohol consumption in the yachting industry and its effects on crew members. This session will discuss the challenges of maintaining sobriety, provide support resources, and promote a healthier onboard culture.
Great. Well, hello. This is my first time meeting you both. So, hi.
Hi.
So my name is Holly. I'm the editor of Dock Walk, and I'll be moderating this panel and the next one. So thank you to Yachting International Radio for having us and for putting on this wellness forum. So this discussion is about sobriety and the drinking culture on board. It's something that we should talk more about. And to help guide us through this subject is Laura Kilbey, who's Chief Stewardess and founder of Sober Crew Social Club, which we'll get onto later, and Gary Napier, who is a psychologist, life coach, and founder of The Gap Counselling. Do you want to each kind of give us a little bit about your backgrounds and basically why you're here to talk to us today? Laura, do you want to start?
Hi. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I feel really privileged to be here. And I think it's such an important conversation. I have been in yachting forever. And so I started back in like the mid 2000s. So I really have been in yachting for a long time. And during that time, I've been both sober and a heavy drinker. And it was during a break from yachting when I decided to start the Sober Crew Social Club, just because having been sober in yachting, I know how isolating it is, how lonely it can be. And it was really, when I started it, a platform just to meet and connect with other sober yacht crew. And really, really quickly, sort of within a matter of a month, I had so many messages coming through, so many people saying, oh my God, I need this. Oh my God, you're sort of telling my story. And I realized just how big a need there was for these sort of conversations to happen in yachting. So yeah, it's just sort of taken off from there, really.
Yeah, that's super. We'll get back around to talking about that a little later in this conversation. Gary?
Hi, so my relationship with yachting is different. It's more from a social aspect, whereby I socialise a lot of the guys who work within the yachting industry through football or going out as friends. And 3 years ago now, but based in Mallorca, I realised that the drinking culture within yachting was beyond the norm. And bear in mind, I'm coming from a predominantly football background, so I'm familiar with how football and drink goes together. But I found that in terms of the quantity and the effect was beyond whatever we consider to be the norm. And then more recently, within the format of the professional context, seeing people with their struggles explain it on a personal basis, whereby they're battling with alcohol, seeing it from the wife's perspective, the families, the consequences of the drink and how it's affected them in their homes, and subsequently some have experienced breakups because of it. So I see, from a layman's point of view, in a social context, thinking, well, this is a bit too much. But then also from a personal perspective, when you're actually meeting families in the room or hearing their stories and saying how alcohol is destroying their lives.
So Laura, what's been your experience being on board of the drinking culture and alcohol consumption as crew?
Well, I think historically, wherever there's been water and boats, there's been booze. I mean, you used to get a rum ration in the Navy. It flows through like the veins of anything, yachties. It's just part and parcel of it. And there's always been this sort of work hard, play hard mentality. And it seems to be the go-to way to blow off steam. It's the way to cope with things. It's, oh, I'm tired, I'm going to grab a beer. It's ingrained in everything that yachting is. It's the not being able to drink for a week or two, so you've got guests on board, and then, oh my God, finally we can go for a drink and get absolutely smashed. It's just, yeah, deeply ingrained in the industry.
And how widespread is it? Is it going to be, you'll find it on a few boats or across the whole fleet?
I mean, there are a few boats that are dry boats, so that, let's say we take those exceptions out, I would say it's pretty widespread. There are more and more people coming into the industry now. I mean, just if we look internationally outside of yachting, more and more young people are drinking less. So as you get more people coming into yachting, I think there will perhaps be a slight shift as we sort of, some of the older crew leave and newer crew come through. But at the moment, as it stands, it's very much widespread. And there's a real narrative that if you don't drink, you are outside the norm. And it's a real sort of bone of contention where it's like, oh, this person's boring, we're going to stick them on watch. You become, that crew member then becomes or can become isolated.
And why do you think the culture exists? Do you think it's because they're in this pressure cooker? Is it peer pressure?
I think it's a really good question. I think there's no one answer to that. You're living in a thoroughly artificial environment. For starters, you're in a sort of Big Brother type situation where you live, eat, work, sleep, in all senses of the word, with your colleagues sometimes, and you are dealing with a heightened sense of existence almost. It's like the highs in yachting are super high, but the lows are really, really challenging. You've got guests on board maybe for a month, 6 weeks charter, and it's back-to-back days of really long hours. You don't get to go home, sit on your sofa, pat the dog and go and sleep in your own bed. I've worked on boats where, this is going back a few years, but where we were hot bunking and things like that because there weren't enough crew on board. So I would sleep in my bed during the day, during the night, somebody else would be sleeping in my bed during the day. These aren't realistic.
It's not normal.
It's not normal. And, for a lot of people coming into the industry, especially now, we're in a situation where people are staying at home longer than ever because people can't move out on their own. So people are sometimes coming straight from home into yachting, into this really intense sort of extreme environment, and they perhaps are thrown in at the deep end of suddenly having to deal with this sort of situation that they maybe don't have the tools to deal with. So then you have the stress, you have tiredness, you have loneliness and being away from family. And that's not just obviously for younger crew members, it's for people across the board. But if you don't know how to deal with that, it's really easy to turn to drink, especially when there is the peer pressure environment as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure we've all been in sort of similar situations and similar environments, even ashore, where there's that pressure to drink. And sometimes it's fun, and then sometimes it's not, and it's about finding that balance. Gary, what do you think is what's your take on why this culture exists? On land and at sea.
In agreement with Laura, there very much is you're either in or you're out, and it's about social identity. Where do I identify myself with? And thinking particularly of men, because that's the people I work with most within the counselling forum. It's masculinity. What's it mean to be a man? And drinking is very much part of that. If you say to somebody, "Oh, you don't drink," to a guy, you then consider not a man, or you're less of a man because you don't drink. What's wrong with you? So there's also trying to keep that persona whereby it's part of being a man. It's part of this culture. Yet, when you actually speak to people on a one-to-one basis, when they feel safe that they can actually open up, some of them don't even want to drink. They do it because they feel they have to. And all that then does is makes them feel weaker. When they feel weak, it then turns into anger. And you've got this internal conflict going inside. And the biggest struggle that I see amongst that culture, when you see them on their personal basis, is, I can't be me. I cannot be me. And a lot of, while we see the drinking culture amongst men, a lot of them individually say, I really don't want to drink, or I don't want to drink that much, but I feel I have to. So, when you're going out, you say, oh, come on, one more. Oh, come on, don't be such a wuss. You feel, okay, you get bladdered, and you beat yourself up afterwards because you think, what is this saying about me? And this is working with people who work on the boats, and whether they're captain or crew members, they have a real identity crisis because they're thinking, who am I? In order to be me, I can't be part of this group. So therefore, I've got to deny who I am to be part of this wider group. Yet neither really happy because you're taking on a role that's not you. And a lot of the other people are as well. Yes, you do get people who use drink as an escape, and that's their go-to place because they don't feel safe to open up. Whether it's to a colleague or a professional capacity or their wife or a friend. So drink is their space. Drink is where I numb the pain or I can release, and it then becomes their dependency. I've been drinking for 5, 10, 15 years. I don't know life without it. And the thought of going with a day or half a day without a drink for them is scary. It'd be like losing your best friend. So there's a real attachment there. And for me, when I'm working with the individuals and families, it's really going to the root, okay, what is the real reason behind the drink? And ironically or interestingly, depending on how you receive it, some don't want to work on the boat, but they feel trapped because the money's good, the lifestyle's good, and it's paying for the things at home. So, well, for me to go and do a normal 9-to-5 job is not going to bring in the revenue that I'm earning now. So for individuals feeling trapped, it's not good, but I'm speaking as a man. When we feel trapped, it's not a good sign. When we feel stuck, and then we'll drink more, then the anger will come out and the abuse and the fight. It's
just get stuck in a cycle of
it's a fire that really needs to be put out, but it will only be put out if we have forums such as this and safe space whereby we can say what's really going on, what we want to do, what we don't want to do, and that drink is not the answer.
It's interesting when we talk about peer pressure and this sort of herd mentality, because the conversations around alcohol consumption are usually about the self. How can I be sober? How can I say no? Or, actually I'm going to stay home this evening. But actually the education has to come for that person, but also for other people to respect the wishes of people who wish to be sober, not to put on the pressure, not to single them out as being different than the rest of the group. It's
yes, it is that. Sorry. No, so it is that fear of being different, fear of standing out. But the irony of it is, so many people in that you're actually not standing out. You just need to be the first person to make that step, and then somebody else says, "Yes, I'm with you." So you think I'm the only person here who's struggling, who doesn't want to do this, but not knowing possibly the guy who you're drinking with or in that group is going through the same. And I just see it through the counselling, because I'm thinking, you guys either work on the same boat or you're socialised together, yet you're seeing me on an individual basis regarding similar problems.
Yeah. So what are the psychological effects of alcohol consumption? How can it harm our mental well-being and mental health? Gary, do you want to take this one?
Okay, yeah. I would say the obvious harm, energy, fatigue. You cannot perform at the same energy levels as when you've got a clear mind, as when you're sober. Also, I would say, probably familiar with Gabor Mate and his famous important quote when it says, "Don't ask about the addiction, it's why the pain." And the alcoholics have just come on because they've worked in the boat. They've got often used to alcohol before joining that industry. And it's really getting to the bottom of, okay, what pain are they covering up through the alcohol? And that pain could be the relationship. It could be a divorce. It could be financial struggles. And so there's psychological harm. It's not necessarily the alcohol itself. It's what it's trying to bury. But when you realise when you sober up, that pain, that anger is still there, then you think, right, I've got to drink more. And then we're becoming more ineffective. The performance at work decreases. And then we're probably possibly faced with relationship issues, threat of losing your job. And then it just compounds and compounds and compounds. So really, when I'm working with patients and clients within the yachting industry who are suffering with alcohol abuse, most important for me is, okay, take me back. What was the pain? What did you experience either as a child or adult? When did you first learn to turn to alcohol? When did you first start using it as a dependency, as self-medication? Because there's a reason why behind the what. So we focus on the what, the action, but there is a why behind that action. So psychologically, it's not the alcohol, it's whatever pain they're trying to numb through the alcohol or escape.
Laura, did you have an answer for that one?
Yeah, So I agree 100% with what you've said, Gary. And as you say, it's not necessarily just alcohol. It could be gambling, online shopping, sex, whatever it is. It's a coping mechanism. And I think often, if we talk about in yachting specifically, as there often isn't an outlet, and sometimes you can work on a boat where you don't have, like your safe person. On boats, often you quickly form bonds, but sometimes you don't have somebody, you're in a group of strangers. And so you do self-medicate. And whether that be something that's going on at home, something that's going on the boat, to combat feelings of stress, anxiety, loneliness, and it sort of gives you a temporary reprieve from whatever it is that you're feeling. But ultimately those feelings, as Gary said, they don't go away. They just sort of come back, often deeper, harder and stronger to then try and deal with. And the need to numb it again, as you say, comes back and the cycle continues.
And if someone is, I know that Laura, you've used the word sober curious or sober or even struggling with alcohol, and they want some kind of support system to help maintain their sobriety, help them with alcohol consumption, excessive drinking. What are the options that they have?
Well, I think that's a really good question, and that's the sort of thing that I have been working on, basically. So I trained as a coach, but I'm not an expert. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not an expert in sobriety. I only speak through my own experience, which people seem to resonate with. But I think the thing is that if you have an addiction, and even if it's not an addiction, I think that's another thing that's really important to highlight. You don't have to be addicted to anything to want to change your relationship with it. Lots of people in my sort of personal life, when they found out I gave up drinking, it was like, oh my God, are you an alcoholic? And it's like, well, it's a really sort of, it's a bit of a demonized term. Like, I didn't like my relationship with alcohol and I wanted to change it. I don't need to be like drinking first thing in the morning when I open my eyes to want to change my relationship with alcohol. But I think it's also really important. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. That there's not a sort of one size fits all cure. There's not a sort of, okay, if you want to become sober, this is what you must do. So I think there are lots of different ways. For some people, it's a fellowship like AA. For other people, it's 1 year no beer. For 1 year, it's therapy. For one person, it could be therapy, or, there are so many different ways. And it's just creating a place where people can access those resources and find out what works for them.
And Gary?
Yeah, it's, as you were speaking, Laura, I was thinking about the word identity, and it's regards to how do I want to be associated with alcohol? Do I want zero relationship with alcohol? Do I want to be a social occasion? Do I want to be able to, I control it when I have a drink? Or do I accept that I've got a problem, I want to do something about it, or I've got a problem, I don't want to do something about it? And because, as I mentioned earlier, if you've depended on something for a big part of your life as a coping mechanism, the thought of doing without it is scary. It could be the same in a relationship. You don't want to lose a partner because even though they might be abusive to you, the thought of them not being there is actually more harmful than in your mind than them being there and abusing, which is why we often question, why do people stay in abusive relationships? Well, with alcohol, if it's abusing us, it is an abusive relationship, but the fear of being without it is greater. So I believe what's needed more, for example, I work more on individual, but I'm really trying to promote more group therapy, because I think the more safe space we can have where it's more than 3-4 people that open up and share their experiences, the better we are, because then we don't feel so alone. We don't feel judged or criticised or that big word shame. And I know that we've got Alcohol Anonymous, which is a worldwide there, but people still are fearful of going there just in case they see somebody that they know. And especially on an island like Mallorca, whereby in the expat community, most people know most people, you know each other through directly or indirectly. So
Especially in your
fear factor there of, it's a glorified village. So it's really trying to break that by making it feel more safe and having that trust element there, that those famous words, it is okay. So for me, it's more group, and the ultimate is talking. Yeah, we could have the right tools and plans and programs, but without talking, there's very little change, because we need to share our experiences.
Absolutely, and I think that's what you're trying to do here with the sober cruise social club. I almost got those 4 words mixed up.
Oh my god, if I could start again, I would change the name. It is such a mouthful, and every time I say it, I like trip over it. It's ridiculous, but I'm here and I'm sticking with it. But yeah, that is exactly it. And you know, with something like alcohol, whether you feel like you have a problem or you don't, exactly as Gary says, this is my message every time I share anything, is just reach out and talk to somebody. And this is the benefit of things like, I agree it completely. So, you know, the plan for me in the future is to have something like that, a safe space where people can come together and share their experiences, because it is so isolating, especially with an addiction such as alcohol. Well, I suppose any addiction, but with alcohol, it does often change the way that somebody behaves, and then they act in ways that are out of character, ways that they don't like. They may do things that they are ashamed of, and it perpetuates that cycle. And I think often it can be a case of somebody may not necessarily have sort of trauma in the past that they're drinking for, but sometimes alcohol addiction can grow, and it is insidious and it's very progressive, because of the alcohol itself. You do something, you go out, you get really drunk, you feel like an absolute asshole. The next day you don't know how to look at yourself in the mirror, you feel really embarrassed, you're on board, everybody on the boat saw, and then, you know, then there's that shame, and then again it just becomes more and more difficult to deal with. And in my experience, being open and talking about this sort of thing really is the only way to deal with it, because the more alone you feel, the deeper that feeling of shame is, and it just gives you more reason. And you know, there are so many people who stop drinking but don't deal with what's going on internally, and so they just pick something else up. You know, it changes. Okay, good, I'm no longer drinking, but actually I'm spending 12 hours a day scrolling on my phone because I can't be alone with my own thoughts. You know, it's like it just shifts. But the trouble with alcohol is it obviously is physically has a very negative impact.
Yeah, we have a question from Beat Library, who's said, have you found a substitute when on board? When I want to hang with my crew, alcohol is always part of our bonding. So I guess what are the alternatives to drinking?
Well, I think immediately in reading that, I mean, there are so many alcohol-free alternatives. If in the immediate, you know, you want a substitute so you still feel like you're part of, because that's such a, you know, it's a human driver, is to be inside, not outside the group. And you know, I drink alcohol-free beers, or I'll have like a gin and tonic, because I don't want to sit there with my sad glass of lukewarm tap water feeling like I'm not involved, you know. And and
there are so many alternatives. It's kind of trendy now, isn't it?
There are so many alternatives. There are so many alcohol-free beers, so many gins and loads of wines, most of which are absolutely revolting, to be honest.
I love a mocktail.
No, but there really are so many alternatives. But then also in terms, like in a deeper way, I think it comes from the top. Whereby there needs to be the initiative to have more crew bonding activities that aren't centered around alcohol. And you know, that's really personal. It's not a one size fits all. Every crew is different. But I think having I think Hugo mentioned yesterday, having things like suggestion boxes with things that people like doing, I think that's a great idea. But I mean, there are so many alternatives. Go karting, you're on a boat, have a water sports day, go ice cream tasting, you know, go on a track day, do something, go on a tour, go on a trek. You know, it doesn't have to be like, oh, let's just fall into the Blue Lady because it's the closest pub and everyone we know is going to be there. You know, there are so many different things that can be done. But I think interacting with your crew and having a captain, head of department that is mindful of that and is involved and is aware of what's going on and trying to create that cohesion without the sort of lazy option of just getting pissed.
Certainly from a dock walk perspective and here in Fort Lauderdale, the options for crew we've noticed are all to do with drinking, open bar, kind of mixers. And I've seen over in Europe that there's one club that comes to mind. They're called Yachties Run Wild. And they're a group of girls, all yacht crew, that just go running every week.
I think they're in Palmer.
Yeah, in Palmer. I mean, they do run to the bar. But it's not the drinking isn't at the heart of it. It's the running and the community and the bringing, coming together of people. So, and that was just started. That didn't even come from sort of top down leadership. That was just started kind of bottom up. But how important, Gary, do you think is leadership, people in leadership positions when it comes to promoting healthier means of bonding on board?
Very, very important. I mean, we're aware that culture starts at the top. It starts with the leader, and any effective change has got to start from those people who are in charge. And the yachting industry is a unique industry because, to my understanding, it depends on the owner of the boat or the captain. So you can have two boats next to each other with completely different cultures. So I'm not sure if it was you who mentioned it earlier, Holly, about education. It's getting the owners and the captains to see the benefit of having crew members whereby the drinking culture is not dominant. And whether that's through even saving cost of money, recruitment, having better performance, but they need to see the benefit, because if they've grown up in that culture and they see it as old school, they're going to think, well, this is what we do. It's part of yachting. It's what appeals to people. But when they see the risk and we hear more about the potential harms that it's doing to the individuals on the boat, their families, the ripple effect it has, it may have a wake-up call. And I know there is some positive work going on, but like everything, we need more. So for me, if we were to do the education and programs such as this, which is fantastic, we need the people who can make the effective change to be engaging in this. Otherwise, it's a much harder struggle.
Awesome. And we're kind of coming to the end of our discussion now. I just wanted to get some final thoughts and final advice from the both of you, and where you see kind of alcohol consumption going in the next few years. Are we going to see this big reduction because of new crew coming in who are drinking less? Laura?
I think it will be a slow sort of thing. I think it will happen, just as we say, naturally, people are drinking less. And especially, as I say, the younger generation, people of my generation, if you wanted to go out and meet your friends or you wanted to pull somebody, you had to go to a bar. Nowadays, everybody just sits on their phone and that's how they communicate, So I think naturally it is going to change, but it's a slow process because of the nature of the industry. And I think I was told once, the way that the industry works is everything goes along, then something bad happens, and then we address it. So we've lost crew members to suicide, and now we have a big push in the industry for mental health and wellness, which is amazing. There has to be. There's been needing to be a big shift for years. But I just think it's only a matter of time before we start to see more and more incidents happen. And I know people who've fallen overboard when they've been drunk. I've known captains who've crashed boats because they've been drunk. It's only a matter of time before these sort of incidents, there's a bigger incident that really causes an issue. And I think, as I was saying, it needs to start from the top. It needs to be sort of included with the STCW. There needs to be more knowledge. But just to anybody who is struggling, just please know that you're not alone. Always reach out. There are so many different people you can talk to, myself being one of them, where you can find a judgment-free space and somebody who's probably been through whatever you're going through. And just share, break the shame, share, and I promise you it will feel easier.
Gary, closing thoughts?
Yeah, echo those words. You feel alone, but you're not alone. And it's recognizing the difference. Nobody can deny how you're feeling. You may feel alone, but you are most certainly not alone. And there's so many different support networks out there. And I would just encourage anybody who's listening to this now or in the future come across, just just reach out, even if it's to a friend or a stranger, someone, just reach out, because you'll then realise very quickly, wow, I've got support. I am not on my own, even though I feel alone.
Yeah, super. And Sober Crew Social Club and the Gap Counselling both have Instagram channels, and I'm sure their DMs are open if anyone has any other questions or does want to reach out for some advice.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I think that brings us to the end of section 2. Thank you so much. No, I think we could have continued this conversation on for another half hour, but I'd love to speak to you both again soon in the future.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.